Greetings, beloveds. It's Amy Caryn Johnson, the Earth Channel, back with another message from Gaia. Today, Gaia wants me to share with you about trauma. And basically, we're working from a very broad definition of trauma. It can involve emotional trauma and it can involve physical trauma. And I would say both of them are likely that we've suffered at least some minor trauma in our lives if we've reached the age of 10. So just to give you a couple of examples, if you are getting stuck in a certain repetitive type of movement, say you're even training to run a half marathon. If you have done this before, you know the importance of cross-training. So it's not just running. If you were just running, you would just be doing that repetitive type of motion and you would be likely to be injured in the half marathon or even while you're training. The purpose of cross-training is to work different muscles so that they can support the primary muscles that you're using when you're running. The other kind of example has to do with something not quite so physically intense, such as running or exercise. But we're here in most of the United States experiencing the return to standard time away from daylight savings time today as you're watching this. And when we have this interruption to our routines, sometimes that means that we're still trying to do autopilot, which can have its own issues sometimes if we're too much on autopilot all the time anyway. But then when we're faced with an interruption to that autopilot, that routine, we can more likely come across some kind of trauma in terms of being caught off guard, being caught unprepared, and excuse me, maybe even being physically injured, not as a result of training or physical activity, but just as a result of not expecting, not anticipating something coming in. And that could be traffic. It could just be having to sit in a different space. Maybe routines are changing for some reason. If you end up sitting in a new chair that's not adjusted ergonomically for you, you may end up favoring one side or sitting at a new desk, sitting at a new angle, somewhere where you're putting one arm up all the time. Trauma tends to affect the sides of our bodies. And so there's some infinite movement that Gaia wants me to share with you today to help heal some of those possibilities of trauma in our bodies. And even if it is an emotional trauma, it still can get stored in our bodies. The other part that Gaia wants me to share with you before I share those movements is that when we look often, as we do, at the I Ching in an overlay with the zodiac, and that generally comes from human design, we see that we are approaching one of those midpoints between equinox and solstice, Samhain, as it's often referred to. And that's traditionally celebrated on November 1st, the day that you might be watching this, the day that this video will be coming out. And that is based on our calendars, November 1st. However, back before there were calendars like the ones we use today, and back before there were even clocks like the ones we use today, back when it was more using like a sundial and just really being in tune with nature in the place where you live and just watching the sun and being very in tune with exactly where that is along in relation to the horizon, we would have more likely been celebrating Samhain later this week, like on Thursday. And I will put up the human design chart that shows that there are 8 points represented in the zodiac, particularly with 8 hexagrams, showing those solstice, equinox, and the midpoints in between those. So there are 8 points total, and all of those are represented by gates in the G center, which I sometimes call the gravitational center. Our magnetic heart center is really how I think of it. And so that's where it's located on the body chart. And you'll see that there are 8 gates there, and those are all represented by those places. So in order to heal ourselves from trauma, we're trying to get unstuck. We're trying to not favor one side or another. We're trying to promote diversity of movement in our bodies. And that's not only for the purpose of that diversity, but also to create a flow, to increase circulation, to really give attention to all those different places, not only in our world, but also in our bodies. And the infinity pattern helps us do that, sometimes even more so than a circle. However, our bodies are generally relatively symmetrical. And so even if we're doing a circle on one side, sometimes that ends up looking like a figure 8 when we do it on both sides, because we've got the 2 different kinds of circles happening on each side. So let's get started with the movement. Again, I want to share, if you choose to follow me in these movements, you are taking full responsibility for knowing what is best for your body. If you have any concerns or doubts about whether this movement is good for you, please don't do it. But as we know, even sitting too much can be harmful for us. So this is a relatively gentle movement, but pay attention to your body, pay attention to how it feels. It should feel relatively comfortable. If it doesn't, please don't do it. So I'll invite you to, if you want to follow these movements, find something to lean on. It doesn't have to be a ball. It can be a chair. You might even be able to do this standing fairly easily, but you might want to use a chair to hold on to for balance. So to engage the side part of our body, so we can just wake it up, feel what it's like to engage those muscles, and then thereby we can feel how it is to release them. We're going to do a figure 8. So we're going to take our leg up a little bit, as much as is comfortable, and we're going to start with a figure 8 like this, in this direction. And as we go to the back of the circle, point your toe a little bit. As you go to the front of the infinity sign, flex your foot a little bit. And go as slowly as you need to. And then I'm going to reverse the direction, 2, 3, and I'm starting to get a little bit of cramping, so I'm going to stop there. And then before we go to the other side, I'm going to briefly check in. So I invite you to join me in checking in if you're following with these movements. Close your eyes for a moment and just feel if you notice any difference on each side, from one side to the other. I just did this with my right leg, and I'm noticing that my right leg feels a little bit closer to the floor, a little bit more relaxed. The other one feels a little more bunched up. Just noticing, no judgment. All right, I'll do the other side. So again, as you go to the front of the infinity pattern, flexing, back, pointing, 2, 3, then I'm going to switch directions. Flexing, 2, pointing at the back, 3. And I think I did one more on the other side, so I'm going to do 4 there in that direction. All right, I'm going to check in one more time. And now my left leg is feeling more relaxed as well. So I'll invite you just to check in with your whole body for a moment. Take a breath, let it go. Give gratitude for your body, for everything it does for us. And just send your roots down into Mother Earth, also giving her gratitude for how much she supports us. And she wants me to remind you, as always, how much she loves you, how much she wants for us to commune with her more. She has so many treasures waiting for us to rediscover. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste, beloveds.